Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities sector. My name is Jesse Day, and on this episode, I'm very excited to welcome Tom Luongo to the show, a former research chemist, anarcho-libertarian, and Austrian economist whose work can be found on Zero Hedge, Newsmax Media, and more. He is the founder of the Gold Goats and Guns blog. We're going to discuss President Trump's ultimate impact on markets, the economy, and the geopolitical landscape, and learn why Tom thinks Trump could be the most impactful leader since Genghis Khan. We're going to learn about areas of the market where he is seeing opportunity at present, his current outlook for the war in Ukraine, and why he believes there's already a framework in place to put it to an end, and so much more. Strap yourselves in for my epic conversation with Tom Luongo. Tom Luongo, great to have you back on the show. It's been a while since I had you on, so I want to get an idea of where your head's at when it comes to the main themes and trends you're currently watching in markets and the economy that you think more investors should be paying attention to. Broad question, but take it wherever you'd like.
Oh, Christ. Where do you go from there? Good afternoon, Jesse. It's good to see you again. I hope your 2025 is treating you well. I know that at this point, I don't know about you, but I check my phone every hour to see if Trump's done another thing that's awesome. Literally, it's like if I'm awake, I hate to say it, but if I'm awake from my phone for more than about an hour, I'm like, dude, did Trump do something awesome? And then he's usually has, like, and this is like 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, it's crazy. What am I looking at? Well, we're recording this on the day after China dropped DeepSeek on our heads, and proving, as my friend and partner Dexter White put it to me this morning, proving that the Chinese know how to code, and they do a better job of it than the Indians do. And apparently, you do proper database management, and in fact, learning language model management, and you can cut the cost of usable AI by a factor of, a couple of orders of magnitude. The good news about that, to be honest, is that while it's going to be bad for a lot of AI stocks, I think in the short term, I think this is, or even in the long term, I think this is real, and I think it's abiding, and we need to deal with it. What's important about this is that now all of a sudden AI is a thing that is a tool, as opposed to a thing that everybody is trying to financialize and make money off of, and figure out how they can consolidate it and wrap their heads around it and keep it for themselves, right? Because if you create something, it's a kind of a classic barrier to entry thing. They're like, well, we have to create this AI that needs all of this compute, and therefore only certain companies can do it. And it's a classic, like, hey, how about we have this great new thing that humanity's created, and then only 3 or 4 companies control it all, or 1 or 2 companies control it all. Kind of like what they did with chips, right? Kind of like what they did with operating systems. Like, and we remember, like, some people have been comparing it to the Netscape moment when, Netscape was charging us $30 for the browser, and then Microsoft just gave it to us. And just made it in the operating system, and then made it a part of the operating system, and all of a sudden Netscape was like, huh, what? And I'm like, it's just a text parser. That's all it is, right? HTML, I mean, certainly 1.0 and 2.0 wasn't all that particularly great. And I remember sitting there, being an old internet hack the way I am. I mean, I'm going back to when I was in college, using things like Gopher, right, and Usenet and stuff, the old original internet. We kept saying, I kept looking at the hypertext, going, really? It's just Gopher, except like better. I mean, it's not, you know what I mean? It wasn't all that big a deal. And I guess I date myself when I say that. So I've always been kind of almost singularly unimpressed with AI and its current implementation for a variety of reasons. And now that we have this, and it's clear, what they've done, which is to basically, cut off the tailing zeros and stop computing the stuff that doesn't matter. Wow. Now we get to have a tool that will actually make our lives better, and it's been democratized, and it's open source, and all of a sudden the whole industry has just had to go, oh, it's another illusion that they created, another illusory market that they created out of nowhere. And I find it hilarious that I'm looking at this today, and the NASDAQ is off 612 points, and the Dow is up 300. That should tell you everything you need to know. That the rotation trade out of tech stocks in the Mag 7 or whatever is here. And now it's going to be, we're going to get out of this momentum trade that has been carrying the NASDAQ for quite a long time now. Money seeking more yield through number go up as opposed to fundamentals. And now it's going to rotate into, effectively, especially with Trump in office now, is in a far closer approximation of infrastructure stocks. So while these guys have been sucking all the capital out of all the other industries, now we get to see where the market, now when we've got this out of the way, now all of a sudden the market can go, oh, wow, you mean like we can use this to like coordinate, I don't know, pulling metals out of the ground and chopping trees down, all the things we need in order to rebuild our roads and, build pipelines and build businesses and build houses and, generate wealth, as opposed to concentrating the wealth in the hands of a very few new oligarchs as opposed to old oligarchs, right? And that's what the fight was between, in effect, big tech and little tech up until this moment. And now little tech can focus on improving what really needs to be improved, which is the whole monetary handling system. So I'm thinking about that in the same context as I'm thinking about what's happening with Bitcoin as Trump comes to office and the potential for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I'm now trying to parse that alongside what's going on with Ripple and the massive breakout that's happened in Ripple, and whether or not, and we're going to find out in probably the next, I think, 2 or 3 months, all the questions that many of us old guard Bitcoin guys have had about Ripple as to who is actually in control of it. And we're going to find, and I mean that when I say something like that, I mean which group of oligarchs controls Ripple. Is it the Bank of England? Is it us? Is it Wall Street? Is it, who is it? Because we don't know. And we're going to find out. And we're going to find out by inference as to, who winds up getting behind it and then who winds up what aspects of the monetary system and the Forex markets is Ripple actually going to be allowed to dominate in or not. And if it gets quashed by the Trump administration, then we know it's our enemies. Because at this point, if you want to understand, and I'll turn the microphone back over in just a second, because this is the big theme. If you want to understand what Trump is doing, it's very clear to me from like weeks before, 3 or 4 weeks before he took office, that his goal was to break the United States off of our old colonial masters. Everything that I've been talking about for the last couple of years that we should do, Trump is doing. When Elon Musk went directly after Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, over the Pakistani rape gangs, I'm like, oh, that's the tell, right? And so now the big question is, and you have to think of it this way: you can't make America great. You can't rebuild America if America is outwardly focused, trying to take care of everybody else's needs. Notice how Europe is complaining that the United States is abandoning them. Notice how, everybody's talking in those terms, right? It's kind of like abusive parents who keep who abuse their children and keep withholding their approval in order to keep the child on the hook. I wouldn't know anything about this, by the way. Like I didn't have a mom like this or anything. No, not really. So, but we all have, many of us have this experience, and I want you to think about it in the terms of the United States and, its relationship to the cultures that created it in the first place. So, we're all the United States was settled by a bunch of people who didn't want to be ruled by Europe anymore. And then there's always been this kind of love-hate relationship where, we seek their approval for whatever it is that we're going to do. And part of that is because they had the capital and they used it to help build our country. And and so there's been this really weird kind of abusive relationship between the United States and the UK and Europe. And I do separate the UK out from continental Europe for certain aspects of this. So when you look at it, when you start to think of it that way, all of a sudden MAGA takes on a completely different connotation. And then when you parse that in context of things like Bitcoin, Ripple, AI, this, that, and everything else, all of a sudden Trump's agenda looks completely obvious. And America is basically waking up and saying, look, we're not going to apologize for who we are anymore. We're not going to feel bad for the things that we've done. Yes, we've done some bad things, but we're not going to feel bad for it forever. Kind of like what the world has done to the Germans for the last 80 years over Hitler and Nazi Germany. And then this is that we're not going to commit ritualistic suicide over our shame of whatever we did in the past. We can integrate that shame. We can atone for it, and then we can move the fuck on. And if we and I think that's where America kind of is right now, and that I think we're hoping to inspire the Germans to do the very same thing. And and if that's the case, Katie barred the door. Like, all options are on the table, but in the short term, it's going to be very disruptive.
Hey guys, just a quick break to hear from today's sponsor, ARC, Silver Gold Osmium. They offer personalized service and competitive prices with no minimum purchase for silver, gold, platinum, or osmium. Here's just some of the comments left on this YouTube channel about ARC SGO and owner Ian Everard. Have bought from ARC, good source and price. I cannot say enough good about Ian and his company. He is the most honest individual I could find in order to buy precious metals. If you are looking to buy precious metals, I recommend Ian at ARC Silver. He is a straight shooter. So go to arcsgo.com and contact Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com. And make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. Great breakdown. I do want to dive deeper into what Trump has been up to. You mentioned he's doing something awesome every hour. It has been a very interesting ride so far. He was just inaugurated, and he's signing all sorts of executive orders. He's doing all sorts of stuff. For just a few, he's trying to buy Greenland from Denmark. He's proposing Canada become the 51st state. He threatened Colombia when they wouldn't take back their illegal immigrants, and they folded immediately. What has stood out to you so far? Yeah, what has stood out to you so far? How do you think Trump will impact both the geopolitical and economic realms around the world?
In a way that could be as consequential as Genghis Khan in history. And I say that with no degree of irony. I was chatting with Dexter White this morning, actually, and we were talking about what the goal here is. And if the goal is, we were talking about it in terms of some of the things that are happening with respect to things like the Bank of England being broke and the breaking of the European Union and everything else. So we have an opportunity right here as a species to get rid of the oligarchs that have in a sense run the world for the last 600 years or so. And these are major themes, not just the era of the central bank that started with the formation of the Bank of England in 1694. I'm talking about other big issues within the Venetian banking model and all of this stuff, and then how that interfaces with the breakup of Christianity and all of this. We are staring at that kind of moment where if the United States finally puts to bed, and with the help of the Russians and the Chinese, mind you, and it's a very broad picture thing here. I'm kind of like jumping way to the end of the story. If we decide that that's what's going to happen, and that's what they're desperately scared of, right? That's why they're trying desperately to extend the war in Ukraine and this and that, and all these other things. If Trump is capable of doing that, he will have a durable effect on the future of humanity that can only be argued, for like people like Genghis Khan. And I'm dead serious when I say that. And I threw it out there this morning during my conversation with Dexter White, expecting him to go off on me for half an hour. And he went, "No, you're right." I just stopped, and I'm like, yeah, it's that big a potential moment, and they know it, and you can feel it. And so, it's an incredible moment that we're living through right now. And the question, of course, is whether or not, if Trump is who I think he is, and I stress I think, not I know, then that's what's on the table, folks. A complete changing of the world as we've always known it. The system of the world will change. The system of the world will change. I hate to use a phrase, I hate to use a Neil Stephensonism, right? I'm invoking the Baroque cycle, where he wrote a 3-volume historical series based on the formation of around the formation of the Bank of England, because I don't like where Stevenson's gone since then. But like the last thing that man wrote was really consequential, that I thought was consequential, was the Baroque cycle, that and Cryptonomicon. Great books, and I think everybody should read them. What we're looking at here is it's the system of the world can change, and we can decide right here, right now, that we are not going to accept the concentration of power in the hands of oligarchs who don't add value but put up toll booths everywhere to our flourishing to get the things that we want and need. That's been the world we've lived in. That's the system we've lived under for hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. And we stand on the precipice in terms of technology, depending on how we utilize that technology. And that's, I think, why DeepSeek has really freaked people out, because now all of a sudden, I can put it on my phone and have a better AI model than OpenAI was, trying to sell us and trying to figure out a way to monetize. When it's not about monetization, folks. The monetization should happen at the individual actor level, not on the generation and the creation of the tool level. It's like the browser should have always been free. Well, AI should have always been free. It's one of the things that I've not been bearish on Apple, and why, amongst all the old tech companies, Apple is the one that I've had, and begrudgingly over the years, because I was never an Apple fan, simply because I was an old hardware guy, and I was always like, I'm not buying 2-year-old hardware for three times over priced, right? Could never bring myself to buy an iMac to get, to spend 3 times the amount of money for hardware that was 2 years old. But Apple's not that company anymore. And when the Worldwide Developer Conference came out last year, and they were talking about how they were going to create a personalized AI for you, and they were and embed that on the iPhone or your iPad. I'm like, this is what they've always meant by, we do actually don't want your data, right? And no one, they always get lumped in with Apple, Google, then video, and Apple's different. Their ethos is different, but they were operating in an environment where they could not be pushed into that world, right? Because of the centralization that was happening at the political level, thanks to the EU and California pushing this Davosian agenda of total surveillance. And Apple was was building systems that would comply with that, but only just barely, and then was constantly running afoul of the regulators and yada, yada, yada. And you could see it, and American regulators, and you could see it. I'm like, oh, well, here they are. And so when they put that out last year with iOS 17 and iOS 18, whichever version we're on now, and how they're rolling that out, wow. Because that changes everything. That gives us the ability to run businesses and to, get all the benefit and unlock our potential in a way that we haven't been, because we've been, being forced to constantly fill out forms and be, hassled with legalese and all this rotten nonsense and taxes and regulations and, and busybodies running around from the HR department telling you can't do that. And the HR department was unleashed on social media and all of it. And it's all everywhere. And everybody's like, you know what? Fuck off. No. And then it was, of all people, the Chinese that went, oh no, by the way, here you go. And it's not like I don't believe that the CCP isn't still communist. Ideologically, they are. Like I'm not like, like, you know what I mean? Like, this is a weird moment like this, to see this happen and to see a type and kind of disruption that's happening here, and know that all the promises of decentralization of data and money and information, especially information, staring us in the face. And many of us in the, I guess you would call the dissonant commentariat, are nominally the libertarian sect, are rightfully distrustful of all of this because you can't see that far ahead and understand that in this process, it ain't going to be a libertopia. It's going to be decentralization, but the state's going to survive. And I made my peace with that ages ago. Not that I, have to change my personal philosophy, but it's my political philosophy and my political leanings have just fundamentally transformed into something fundamentally different because I'm acceding to reality. Because until those systems, and now is this inflection point the kind of the maximum inflection point, the maximum moment of centralization of power? I think so. Right? But are we on the now we're on the downside of it? And this is what it looks like. And the whole thing ends with a whimper. And Nvidia busting. And as opposed to a bang, which would be a good thing because the bang, of course, is like nuclear war. Who the hell, what's that? And that's what they threatened us with nuclear war. And we just said, no, absolutely not. You spend 2 generations scaring us that nuclear war is going to be the worst thing imaginable, and then you threaten us with it. And you expected us to just, roll over and die? Like, no, they expect that. Again, it's like, do you expect me to talk? No, Mr. Bond, I expect you to die, right? And no, we're not going to do either of those things. We're not going to talk, or we are going to talk, and we're not going to die. And that, I think humanity's making that choice. And I think it's a good thing. I think it's a very good thing.
Well, given everything you've laid out about this changing world order, I'd like to do a bit of a thought exercise from an investment standpoint. So if you, Tom Luongo, today had no assets whatsoever, they were all taken away, and you were handed $100,000, let's say, or some amount of money, and you had to rebuild your portfolio from scratch with all the knowledge that you have right now, which areas of the market would you be looking at?
Oh, Jesus Christ. There's so many opportunities, right? But until this old system is properly repriced, I can't change my fundamental investment thesis that the money's overvalued. Gresham's law is still operating, and maybe even operating at a level that we've never even contemplated before. I'm looking at this window and at my camera, and right below it is my browser, and I've got it open to my favorite financial site, and with the Bitcoin price right there, and I'm like, and I know that Trump wants to put is serious about a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and I'm saying to myself, is Bitcoin at 102 grand undervalued? Because the system has to be revalued. Bond prices are too high. Stock prices are too high in some ways. Like, everything is mispriced. Some things are the wrong things are overvalued. The right thing, the right things are undervalued. Right? It's Gresham's law operates, and people misquote Gresham's law all the time. And they think that good money drives out bad, or bad money drives out good. No, overvalued money circulates, and undervalued money is hoarded. That translates into bad money drives out good. But the mechanics of the original statement are much more important. So what's undervalued? Well, clearly that with a high stock to flow ratio, something like Bitcoin and gold with a high stock to flow ratio isn't moving. Now, gold doesn't move for a variety of other reasons, which is that it's big and bulky and it's ugly, and and you got to move it around and yada yada yada, and you don't carry around gold coins in your you don't carry a 400-ounce gold bar in your pants in order to buy a house, right? But whatever. Well, in this case, okay, let's 100-ounce gold bar. At least in my world. But Bitcoin, but carrying around a thing with 4 Bitcoins on it is a different story, right? So, that's one. So you're asking a direct question. I don't really have a good answer for you, other than I'm going to be in all the asset classes that I still think are incredibly undervalued. And so that would be gold, that would be silver, that would be Bitcoin, that would be commodities, honestly, in general. I think I just published an episode of my podcast with Tracy Schuchart and talking about Trump's desire to drill baby drill. And Tracy spends half an hour explaining to everybody why that's not going to happen anytime soon. The structure of the market is, and of the supply chain for oil and the investability of oil and everything else has been destroyed. I've been screaming to the high heavens for 2 years, Moya, not MAGA, make oil investable again, because it's not investable when the weekly volatility on oil is 6%. And that half of the governments of the world are absolutely hostile to it. How are you supposed to invest in this? And that's the big toll booth. So oil has to be freed from this control. Natural gas has to be freed from this control, and everything else. So once that, but notice how they want to control information, they want to control energy, they want to control, our ability to access, transportation. They have control over all those things: communications, transportation, all that stuff. I keep saying over and over again, they have control of the wire, and the wire is a metaphor for the transmission of prices and information. They have controlled all of those things, and they're beginning to lose control of some of them. And we have to encourage that, and we have to continue encouraging that. And that's what I've seen from Trump so far in the first 7 days. That has just been astounding. I never thought I'd see it. And I hoped, but I never thought I'd see it. So my portfolio hasn't changed with the advent of Trump. I expected him to win. I set up the portfolios for both Gold, Ghosts, and Guns and for the Ultimate Wealth Report, which I write for Newsmax, along the same lines. And, and I haven't made a move in 3 months because we're set up for it. We're just set up to win. We didn't win in 2024 but we got killed in 2024. But in 2025 and beyond, I think there's going to be another round of commodity cost push inflation. So if I'm putting $100,000 bet on the table, I'm buying my portfolio. I'll be honest with you, and I'm going to let it ride. And I may miss a couple of things along the way, but that's fine. I don't have to catch everything. As I taught by the great Jim Sinclair, leave 20% on the bottom and the top and catch the 60% in the middle, and leave the 20% on the top and the bottom and the top for the God agreed. Well, in a portfolio sense, you do the same thing. You're not going to catch everything. You don't have to chase every good story that's out there. If you chase, and if investors, chase better stories than I do, great. I'll just clap. Like, I don't have to win every trade to make money. And I think a lot of people have to, a lot of us, including myself, have to learn. That's probably the hardest fought lesson in all of investing. Catch the trend, understand the trend, see what's happening, and go from there. Like, I wouldn't be long. I wouldn't be long AI chips at this point, but I would be long GPUs, right? So I've always been an AMD guy. I have always hated NVIDIA for a variety of reasons. So I'd be long Apple and AMD, if you're going to play the chip market. That's where I'd be, because Apple and AMD have the best chips, and they have the best GPUs.
Well, I want to circle back to natural gas because you brought up both oil and gas there. It seems interesting because Trump is going to allow more LNG terminals to come online, allowing very low-priced U.S. natural gas to be sold into the much higher-priced European market. Now, the AI data center story was that natural gas was going to benefit because they require so much processing power. They have to build all these data centers. Does DeepSeek change that calculation now? Could that be why perhaps today we're seeing natural gas drop by over 6%? So I'd like your thoughts there, and how you think that the natural gas market might evolve moving forward.
That's a good question. Yeah, natural gas is all hard today, but natural gas is always a sell at $4 a million BTUs. By the way, like it just kind of always is, especially given the current situation, in the structure of production in the United States, and that we're also kind of past most of the polar vortex because it's. I've got my windows open in my office today. I'm not smoking a cigar and killing myself, right? And for the first time in over a week, and I'm in North Florida. I mean, it's been really cold, and that's not normal. We have cold days, but we never have like 10 days worth of like persistently cold weather. So especially at the end of January, maybe early January, maybe late December, but never late January like this. So the natural gas story in the U.S., yeah, the permitting process, his EO on the permitting process is, I think, one of the most consequential because I, again, was chatting with my friend Vince Lanci about our friend Vince Lanci about this from my podcast, and Vince was like, I don't think Trump's going to be able to get his agenda through because he was thinking in terms of the old system of permitting taking 10, 12 years to get a permit for anything and a refinery, and I'm like, and then he puts out that EO, and I sent it to Vince as a text, and he was like, oh, I guess I was wrong. I'm like, yeah, no, he's changing everything. And if Trump really wants to make Canadians happy, he said, look, if British Columbia, you want to be the 53rd state after Alberta and Saskatchewan, we'll give you Kitimat and we'll reopen the export terminal for Kitimat, British Columbia. If you go back 12 years, I remember I was studying this when Shell was developing the export terminal, LNG export terminal, Kitimat, British Columbia, and they had to abandon it. And since then, the Canadian oil market has been just crushed. Since then, Tracy pointed out to me the other day, like Canadian Western Select is trading for $25 a barrel. It's got no market because it has to go through U.S. export terminals in order to get to the market. Like, do you want to make British Columbia great? Well, you got to become part of the United States. You got to cleave off Vancouver, and we'll build export terminals in British Columbia for natural gas and oil and everything else. And then all of a sudden, that calculus changes completely. It all depends on what your view of the future looks like. So, yeah, no, Trump wants energy costs down. And he's right to say that we've had an artificial capping on the price of energy, on the supply of energy, by this insane Davosian project called climate change. And I think the thing that I was most proud of was, and I said this before the inauguration, I said, I'm not really interested in this inauguration speech, even though that was awesome. I said, when he goes to speak at Davos, that's the one I'm going to be watching really carefully. And then he goes in and he literally just, lights a bag of poop on fire and throws it on the stage. And I'm like, I mean, I literally could not contain myself. I started cackling like a madman. It was great. And then when he took Brian Moynihan, the CEO of BOFA, to task for debanking conservatives, I was like, that's it. We're done. I don't need to watch anything more. I've had enough candy bars for the day. This is great. I can't do it. No, oil my liver. I can't do this. Right. Like, no, stop, please. No more. I don't need any more caviar. I'm good. This is great. No, I don't need another scotch. Like, I'm good. Oh my God. Nope. Sorry. Not even, I know I don't need my sixth cigar for the day. I'm good. But so when you think about it from that perspective, it's very clear that he's wants to not just drive oil prices down, but drive supply up and get rid of the artificial costs of bringing oil and natural gas and energy to market, thereby restoring profitability for everyone, for the consumer, for the producer, for the pipeline guys, for the storage guys, for everything. He understands that it's all the current structure of the oil market is an artificial one created by unnecessary and onerous regulation in order to sell this idea that peak oil is real. Peak oil has never been real. It's always been a dodge. It's always been nonsense. And anybody who, and you know, when I've argued with peak oil guys about this publicly, and straight up, they published the chart of the structure of the amount of oil that we produce and how conventional oil has not increased in output for, I don't know, 15, 20 years, and natural gas liquids and the light and all that stuff has increased. And we've changed the definition of a barrel of oil to reflect that. I said, well, why do you believe that? Why do you believe that supply number hasn't increased for 15 years? Is anything other than an outgrowth of a regulatory environment that is hostile to producing more conventional oil? That it's not a matter of there's not the oil out there to go get, that it's not profitable to bring it to market. And so, you know, that chart can be read a number of different ways. And if I'm wrong about that, we'll find out. But I'm not a big fan of I don't believe that oil is strictly a biotic process anyway. I never have. I'm enough of a chemist to know that, you know, you can make hydrocarbons catalytically from carbonate rocks. So I'm like, you know, I'm just not down with that whole thing. I know there are a lot of oil engineers out there who will scream bloody murder because they have multiple times at me over the last 20 years about this. And I'm like, prove it. Go ahead and prove it. And the evidence of biotic oil does not disprove the idea of abiotic oil. This is important. You know, the presence of one does not negate the presence of the other. So that may make me a Luddite. It may make me, you know, I don't know, whatever you want to call me. I don't care. I only care about what I'm going to see. And I think Trump knows that we have kept our oil off the market on purpose. And he's as much said so. And he's going to release all that information. If he's releasing the JFK files and the MLK files and all this other stuff and the Epstein client list, he's going to release that. And that, I think, scares the bejesus out of everyone. Because then they're like, well, if they lied about all these other things, now they lied about peak oil, and they made us like blend corn into our gasoline and all this other stuff, and made us tried to make us buy EVs and make cars unaffordable and push, CAFE regulations to the point where they are outlawing internal combustion engines and all this. Really? The amount of sheer anger and frustration that is going to engender when that actually makes it into the consciousness of the average dude. Heaven help these people that they ever show their face in public again. Because they will absolutely, at that point, everybody will be justified to take a whack at them. And I hate to say that. I'm not saying they're going to. I'm saying, but they would be justified to do so. Because these people are literally evil. They knowingly destroyed the most important market in the world for their agenda. And whose agenda would that be? The people who don't have any freaking oil, which is, I keep saying over and over again, is Europe. Meanwhile, the Chinese who don't have enough oil, they're like, we'll just go out and buy it from everybody. Hey, we'll partner with Iraq and Iran and Saudi Arabia. We'll just do whatever we have to do to source what we need. And we'll go use it and go make products with it that we can sell at a profit to buy the oil. That's what the Japanese have been doing. You don't see the Japanese complaining that believing in this climate change nonsense. They don't. Not at a legislative level. They know better. They're not stupid. The Japanese not stupid.
Yeah, well put. I want to get your thoughts on Trump's threats on social media, I don't know if you want to call it a threat, but basically telling Russia, hey, you got to wind down the war here. We can come to the negotiating table. We can do this the easy way. We can do this the hard way. What are your thoughts there? Was he serious about those threats? Because obviously one of his campaign promises was, I'm going to end the war on day one. Now, I think most people listening to that realize that that's not realistic. But coming out publicly and kind of getting aggressive towards Russia and by proxy Putin, is that the best strategy? Is this the art of the deal? What's going on here?
I already believe that they have a framework for the end of this war that they negotiated months ago through third parties, and that is purely for domestic consumption. It's purely to suck up airtime and to suck up the air out of the room. I was asked by Sputnik News, to comment on that when it happened, like hours after it happened, and that's what I told them. And I don't believe for a minute that, I don't believe for a minute that Trump thinks that the sanctions are going to, do anything. So he's threatening. What is he threatening Russia with? He's threatening Russia with stuff that Russia doesn't care about. And, Putin laughed it off and blah, 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 blah. No, he has a big, negotiation ahead of him. And he has to go in, all blood and thunder. And that's fine. But it's with the intention of ending the slaughter, and he knows, just like Putin knows, who actually backed the slaughter. Now, let's take this even further than that. Let's talk about this for a second. Notice how Joe Biden didn't pardon anybody involved in the impeachment of Trump over the Ukraine phone call, or anybody who was the architect of the Ukraine war. If anyone is guilty of war crimes, it's Victoria Nuland. All right? Alexander Vindman, Fiona Hill, and all the rest of them. So, they didn't get a pardon. I think that's a good tell that there was a deal between Trump and Biden, to stop the steal on election night, allow Trump to take power. Biden walks off into the sunset, having protected as much of his money as he could, because as a mob boss, when you know you've lost, then you don't care about making more money. You just care about protecting what you've got. So I think Biden has done that well, and he's walked off the scene. I don't think anybody's really going to put up much of a challenge to the pardons of his family, but that was done and left the architects of the war out to hang as a signal to Putin that, and I'll tell you something else. I think Anthony Fauci is going to die in a Russian prison. I think Anthony Fauci is going to be a negotiating point. Because the Russians have been screaming for 3 years at the UN about the biolabs in Ukraine. And they've been assiduously presenting more and more information, entering into the record at the UN. The UN's put the kibosh on all of it. They won't bring it to discussion, everything else. The Russians keep dropping all of this information. So, I think there's going to be a real grand bargain over this that has little to do with Ukraine. Everything with the Ukraine proper, but it's a much, much, much bigger thing. The reason why Trump is going after Greenland is that he's going to put missiles, one of the reasons, among the many reasons to take Greenland as an American territory, is to put our missile shield on Greenland and leave Europe to hang. And he's going to pull all the Aegis Ashore systems and all that stuff out of Poland, out of Germany, move them to Greenland, and tell Putin, this is not my fight. I am not your enemy. They are. You deal with them, and then you let the Ursula von der Leyen Kaya Callas and all the rest of those terrible people, horrible harpies. Let them deal with the reality. Because they all walk around like, and this is funny, and I want you to understand what I mean by this. Everybody is, excuse me, everybody is, tweeting and retweeting and cackling over how J.D. Vance handled Margaret Brennan the other day on Face the Nation. That when one of these leftist, feminist harpies are presented with unapologetic male energy, they don't know what to do. And frankly, I don't care, Margaret, is now the new rallying cry of 2025. And von der Leyen and Kaas and Annalena Baerbock ran into this over in Germany, over Ukraine aid. And then she threw a temper tantrum at Olaf Scholz and walked out, and Scholz, the idiot, tried to, got caught, trying to, bring her back to, like trying to plead with her on no, you just lost. Well, aside from the fact that the SPD at that point probably lost 4 points in the polls. No, that is not the way that works. So that's what's coming. That's what everybody wants. And, I remember Jordan Peterson years ago saying, everybody wonders what a female-led society would look like. And he just kind of looked around and went, I think we're living in it. I think it looks like this.
Thank you for joining us today. This is just part one of an epic two-part discussion with Tom Luongo, so be sure to tune in just a couple days to hear Tom's take on the economic and political turmoil in Canada, why he believes the UK might be headed toward a collapse, his thoughts on emerging markets, and so much more. But for now, this episode is brought to you by ARC Silver, Gold, Osmium. For all your precious metals needs, head to arcsgo.com and contact owner Ian Everard today at 307-264-9441 or by email at ian@arcsgo.com, and make sure to tell him that Commodity Culture sent you. And I'll see you guys in just a couple days for part two of my conversation with Tom Luongo. Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.